Welcome. I met Andrew in 1992, and at that point he was already a hero. And I know there's a couple of people who are in this room who were there when he came back to our house, and he was curating my record collection. And at that point, I had a really shit record collection. But he was really, really lovely. He was like, "You got a bit of Can in there," which was about the coolest record I had. I had a lot of Led Zepp in there. I mean, it was mostly Led Zepp. My name is Chris Madden. I have been doing events like this for the last few years. Justin and I have done a couple of these, not in these circumstances, but it's a really lovely thing that we've come together and that we can have a chat and that we can listen to some music. Two things that I really associate with Andrew: an amazing person to talk to, an amazing raconteur, and of course, you know, that's before we even get to the music. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to have a chat, and we're going to play some music, the two things that were great about Andrew. Joined by Sean, who is 50% of Alphos. Thank you, Sean. We're also joined by Joe, who is a writer and also knew Andrew. Your book, Bass Mid Tops, about sound system culture, is available now. So, and I'm sure we're gonna get into bits of that as well.
And it has Weatherall woven through it, although we turned him down as an interviewee.
Oh, did you? Okay, so brilliant. Well, we'll get to that. And of course, we've got Justin, who is. I've been hugely influenced by you. You play music, you're a record producer, and you're a remixer, and you're an artist and a philosopher as well.
Anything to avoid doing a hard day's work.
Anything to avoid doing a hard day's work. So thank you, Justin, as well. Shall we play the first tune?
Why not?
Yeah, so the first tune is an Andrew remix of Skunk Funk, and I was saying to you guys earlier, I remember a mate of mine ringing me up saying, "Fucking hell, turn on Pete Tong now, there's a Weatherall mix on that is going to blow your mind," and it's this.
Here it is.
And when good music play, we holla.
I heard that on a mix that our friend Bernie Connor did earlier in the week, and I mean that's never been out of my record bag. And it's a flip actually. It's the longer version that I really, which is really spacey and echoey, and it got me to thinking when I was listening to that track earlier in the week, and this really is, I think, for you, Joe, maybe to perhaps expand upon. At the time that came out, the British electric reggae scene was really starting to massively bubble away. Alpha and Omega, Iration Steppers, Abashanti I. But listening to that, what I started to realise was that Andrew's influence in taking that into dance was so fundamental.
For me, I was 17, I think, when that came out,
okay.
And I'd been to a club or two, had to dip to toe into acid house, but mostly our music appreciation was mushrooms on the downs and UFO spotting. And my memory of that tune is predominantly blasting it out of my mate's transit van as we sat and watched the skies. Yeah. And it's heavily evocative of that. But yeah, you can hear the dubbing, and so much of what's happened in the last couple of weeks as all the stories get swapped and the tunes get swapped, and is how the dots get joined from 30 years ago nearly to today. It's like, funnily enough, I was with Rob Gallagher last night, Rob Galliano, who remained a close friend with Weatherall all this time, and I was watching him and Giles Peterson playing, and he was playing the same swooping dub noises over the top of Giles's set, those same pew noises, and it's like, it's a signal through the ages, and as a kid, as a teenager, everything Weatherall did, every record by record, was an introduction into these deep wells of, in this case, dub culture. And suddenly, I connected with the Adrian Sherwood records I already knew.
Listening to that, I haven't heard that for a very long time, and you really hear African Head Charge and Adrian Sherwood's fingerprints all over
absolutely. But also, there's straight away a connection to acid jazz, and we kind of knew Weatherall as. We'd heard of this acid house thing, and my friends' older brothers and sisters were heavily involved, and it was an exciting adventure that was happening. And we knew about indie rock, and he was the great connector with indie rock. And then, suddenly a record like this comes along, or he mentions Throbbing Gristle, and suddenly, boom, the doors are blown off, and it's no longer alternative and dance, but everything.
Yeah. And it wasn't just those. I mean, I remember a very bleary-eyed morning once at his flat when he just finished Screamadelica from the Dixie Narco thing, and we're listening to Dusty Springfield. That was, and you can hear all those kind of Bacco and David, kind of the horns in there. So his influences were so broad.
Yes, yeah. Well, one of the things again, over the last few weeks. The stuff that's online, I mean, I've read a lot of the things that you've written and that you've pointed me to, but it was, Andrew's black books as well. The things that are now being kind of shared with us are just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, country rock, from the very beginning, he was just remix titles. The One Dove that Fallen. It was the Nancy and Lee remix.
That's
and I was
right.
like, what's Nancy and Lee? And then you look up, you're like, Nancy Sinatra, what? Yeah. And then you discover Nancy Sinatra and Lee Hazelwood, and again, doors open to a whole new wormhole in music.
Yeah. Should we have another tune?
Let's have another tune.
Let's have a look. I've got my list here. Oh, it's not letting me in. Okay, so
My Bloody Valentine.
My Bloody Valentine.
Here we go.
how do you take something so dense as My Bloody Valentine and do that?
That reminds me of the very first, I think we talked about the first time I met Andrew. I was trying to remember when it was, and I think I was working at Eastern Bloc Records in Manchester, and we were, at the time, kind of tracksuits and kickers, and kind of beads and whatnot. And I remember I was sort of interested in Andrew's work, and I knew he was in town. I think Jeff Barrett was looking after Happy Monday's press, and was managing Andrew at the time. And I think he said, "Oh, I'm going to pop into the shop." And these two guys walk in, they look like the two musketeers, with silk shirts, curly hair down here, boots, motorbike boots, and kind of like, and I was like, dear God, they're taking a risk walking down Oldham Street dressed like that. But that was that kind of swagger in that record. You can hear it in there, that just kind of effortless taking of essence of rock and roll, the essence of acid house, and sticking them together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And real deal hip hop as well.
Yeah.
Isn't there? The hip hop of the time, you know, you could hear Public Enemy shot through that. And how old was Andrew at this time? Mid-20s, with next to zero studio experience.
Early 20s.
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting about that record is, like, his early remixes, he was like a magpie, a complete kleptomaniac. So the sample in that's obviously the Gang of Four, but it wasn't Andrew's idea. He'd taken it from a Westbam record, Alarm Clock. So Westbam had come up with the idea of sampling the Gang of Four, but Andrew thought, fuck it, I'm having that.
Which, exactly like Loaded, is the Soul to Soul beat via the Edie Brickell
bootleg. Yeah.
Well, that tune, I mean, you know, you'll see me kind of looking out people here, and that tune for me is what I remember Back to Basics being about when Andrew first came, and that influence that he had on Ali Cook, and Ali Cook had on him as well.
Yeah.
Another tune.
Should we have another tune?
Yeah, come on, yeah.
Burning with ecstasy. Babylon.
say something. I'd like to say something about the scope of Andrew's kindness here, because in 1993 I was involved in a night called Sound Clash here in Leeds. It was great. Earlier on, Mark Iration was here, and we had the Iration Stepping Sound System, and Andrew was our first guest. And we invited him up to come up to Leeds, and the proviso was, we want you to play whatever you want. We don't want you playing that shit you play on other places on a weekend, and we can only give you 60 quid. So...
You only gave me 50.
Did we only give you 50? Well done. Sorry, just here. Hang on a minute. I've got that other tenner that I owe you. And he was amazing. So he came up on a Thursday night, so it wasn't the weekend. But he came up with 2 boxes, and he clunked them down, and he said, "I don't really know what to play tonight, so I brought 2 boxes of records with me." One of the records that he brought was in that, and it was, "Andrew, you can play whatever the fuck you like. We just want you to get people dancing through the sound system," and that's what we did. And from then on, you know, certainly where my career in music went was absolutely gifted by him. So, you know, he was a hugely giving guy. How did you come to end up working with him, Sean?
Well, it's a long story. I grew up in the East Riding, and
Right, okay.
I was interested in music from an early age, and decided that I wanted to pursue a career in music. So I had to transport myself to London, where the streets are paved with gold, and try and find a job. So my first job was a booking agent, and I was the booking agent for the Inspiral Carpets, Gary Clayle, the All New Sound System, the Shaman, and then a few others like Gina Washington, the Ram Jam Band, Desmond Decker. But I got to know Jeff Barrett as a result of working with the Inspirals, and I visited his office one day, and I obviously knew Andrew from going out to parties. I think I'd seen Andrew DJing at a house party in Clapham in the summer of 1989, and he was playing a lot of music that you didn't really hear in London at the time, stuff like William Orbit, stuff like On You Sound Records, Chris and Cozy, and this was all stuff that I knew from the alternative scene up here. So I thought, yeah, this is my boy. So I was really, you know, a bit of a Weatherall obsessive at that stage. But Jeff said, "I'm going to meet Andrew for lunch. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right." So we went and had lunch, and we got on really well. So. I was DJing in London at the time. I'd bump into him in the clubs when I was warming up, and eventually started working in the studio and made some tracks which took to his office and said, "Can you listen to this tape and tell me if it's any good?" He rang me about 2 days later and said, "I'm putting this out on Sabres of Paradise." So initially I put some tracks out on Sabres, and then we were kind of in and out of each other's, as Andrew said, in and out of each other's orbits for some time. I drifted out of music, got into mountaineering for a little while, and then messed my shoulder up and couldn't really climb anymore. I thought, I better go back to what I know, better go back to the music. And I was interested, particularly at that time, in the kind of music that Andrew had been playing in the early sort of Balearic days. And I started researching this sort of slower music and realised that a lot of the records that I thought were Balearic records weren't really actually Balearic records. They were records that had been played by an Italian DJ called Daniele Boldelli, the Cosmic Club. And this is stuff like the Unknown Cases, and there's stacks and stacks of them. But I started making mix CDs for my own amusement, and Andrew rang me one night and said, "Mate, can you give me a lift to Brighton, please? My driver's let me down." So he gets in the car, we get to about Croydon, and he says, "Shawnee, have you got any music you can put on?" I thought, "Oh, fucking hell, the only thing I've got these mix CDs that I've made for playing in the car." So he put one on, he said, "Have you got any more of this?" I said, "Yeah, there's 2 more." So we got all the way to Brighton, he digested it, he got out of the car and he said, "Shawnee, this is brilliant, we've got to do something with this." So yeah, that's how it came about.
Wow. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, always giving, eh?
Absolutely, yeah. Thousands of small kindnesses and encouragement, and, you know, helping people get projects off the ground. Great collaborator with people, you know, effortlessly bringing his touch, encouraging things. Yeah, I mean, I think I miss that quite a lot, you know, thousands of small kindnesses and help he gave to people. Would be sad,
And you know, and I think we've all been noticing that, you know, on the social media platforms, you know, the fact that he'd do 50 CDs and give them to somebody to raffle off, you know, for a kids' charity in Northern Ireland. I mean, just really beautiful things like that. I mean, you know, stuff that I didn't know, and I'm now finding out that
for years and years and years, I was a fan. You know, I'm here as a fan more than everything, and I, you know, could have said hello a few times, and I did it from a distance. I was just like, "You're brilliant," but all the way through my first involvement with music, you know, I knew that he was supporting my musician friends, like going above and beyond, coming and playing for less than he needed to. I was knocking about with techno people in Brighton, and Christian Vogel in particular, who is like a super underappreciated in this country at least. But, you know, Andrew was the one person who championed him, phoned him up when the new record came out, said, "I can't understand how you do what you do, you're amazing," came and played at his gigs and stuff. And, you know, it wasn't until 7 years ago that I plucked up the courage to actually say hello, bumping into Andrew at a field at a festival. And before I could, like, I think he knew that I was going to gush at him, so I think he maybe was just preempting me. But he was like, "No, it's all right, I know who you are," and started to recite some things of mine that he'd read, and like what, you know, why he thought they were relevant, and why it was nice to know that someone was out in the field doing this. And then, you know, in the time since then, again, you know, as with so many people, loads of people are kicking ourselves that you didn't spend more time, or like, you know, we had projects on the go that he came and talked at my ambient salon for nothing. He didn't want money. He was just like, give it to local kids. And I would pop into Scrutton Street and talk to him and Tim when they were doing the Asphodel stuff, and you know, there's always time for a cup of tea and just listen to my harebrained schemes and tell me about what, you know, these guys were cooking up, or what him and Tim were doing, or what him and Andy from Ride had got going on. And it was like trying to work out how someone could have that much time for people. Is startling.
You know, I mean, I think one of the things that has really struck me in the last couple of weeks with reading all that stuff is how he actually fitted it all into the, you know, in 24 hours. It's just his work rate was phenomenal.
The work ethic was like, he treated it like a job. We'd go, you know, weekends away, and he'd be back in the studio, and he didn't treat it quite like a 9-to-5 job, but he was in the studio every day of the week. If he wasn't making music, he was researching music, and he really treated it like a job, and he worked probably 6 or 7 days a week, didn't he?
Yeah, completely.
Should we have another tune?
So when Ralph asked me to come on do this talk, he said it'd be nice, Sean, if you could pick some music that you and Andrew bonded over. And this one goes right back to the very beginning. A track that I knew from probably John Peel, I think, from a John Peel show in the 80s. But this is a track by Torch Song, which was a very early alias of William Orbit, who went on to produce Madonna. But this was made in 1983, and it stands up to pretty much anything that was being made in Detroit at the time. Check it out. So, I'll take you back to the house party in Clapham. It was either 1988 or a very early 89. Now, at the time, the clubs in London were, by and large, pretty boring. There's people standing around in silly suits and doughboy caps and like flared trousers in the WAG club, all like hanging around being cool and playing Maceo and the Max across the tracks. And you go to a house party and there's a fella with long hair looking like a Hell's Angel playing music like this. And I thought, yeah, he's my boy. This is
brilliant. Brilliant. I didn't know that tune, I have to admit, and so when I heard it when we were bouncing tunes around and listened to it, knowing Andrew in the tiny way that I did, I totally got why he got that record, and I love, I love that about music. I love that ability to recognise the essences in certain tracks.
It comes back to connecting points again. As I was kind of going through all of the different appreciations and kind of jotting some thoughts down, in the past couple of weeks, one of the things that came to me was that Andrew's approach gave us a roadmap for the world that we're in now, for this glut of information that we're all fed with. That he managed to find those connecting spots. So whether it's the Meat Beat Manifesto record, which suddenly is linked to industrial, to dub, to the future that was coming of jungle and everything else, or whether it's that track, which is psychedelic, it's New York, it's
electro,
exactly. It's like so many different things, and you can hear all those joining points. It's one step from that to Chris and Cozy, and that whole world of industrial weirdness, and there's disco in it, through that understanding and the way he contextualized it and the way he blended it into something else, joining the dots. But as you're saying, like always with commitment and going the whole hog, full focus, it's like, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I would not have the understanding of mapping out music and genres, but also the cultures that went with them, if it wasn't for like being raised on this sort of thing as a teenager,
Yeah.
And Andrew was so learned about that as well. His awareness of culture, it blew my mind.
But more the learning with a light touch,
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
Lightly.
Absolutely.
So it was funny about it, and then suddenly you'd either I grew up reading him in the NME as well as listening to those tracks, and all these funny little catchphrases, Audrey Witherspoon and the donning your trance trousers and all of that sort of thing. And it's only afterwards, as I later learned about conversation with the man, that you come away suddenly realising how much you've learned and accumulated in that time. But what it just seemed like was a laugh.
He probably put me onto more books, as many books as records. And we used to talk about clothes. In fact, not that long ago, I had a bit of a sinking feeling when I noticed he had the same beret as me. I was dreading, oh no, I'm going to have to phone him up and make sure don't wear the beret. And he's always like swapping books, and kind of texts would pop in and like, read this, tried that, and particularly dystopian fiction, which he knew I was into. So he'd send me like endless lists of stuff.
Can you share one with us? What was a good recommendation?
Well, mainly dystopian things about the end of the world, generally. But he put me onto endless reams. Should probably be. I mean, these sort of things would be great to share at some stage, because I think the cultural resonance is vast, and I think the archive of knowledge is something that needs to be shared, because he was all about that. I mean, he would. I know occasionally he used to cover up records in the day, but he was always sharing music, information. He was a giver completely. Never kept things, to himself.
Was the legend not that he stuck "piss off nosy" as a label of a?
He was terrible at keeping those secret, though.
Do you know why I put a label on that? It was the B-side of a Leslie Grantham record.
That was it.
Brilliant.
Someone else told me that story the other day.
It's true.
The Leslie Grantham. Still not found that.
I realised I made a mistake. So I didn't explain about the music tonight. So what we've done over the last couple of weeks is we've bounced around ideas of tracks, and Ralph and I were sat talking a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how the tracks that you were sending, and you were sending, had led us on to so many strands and so many things, mixes that I was unaware of. I was like saying to Ralph, God, how many mixes did he actually do? Has that ever been catalogued?
So unofficially by the gentleman of the internet. I think it's somewhere in the region of about 800. But,
Wow.
That are on that one Google Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There may be more.
Yeah.
Andrew certainly didn't have any idea, because I'd occasionally remind him and he'd say, "Did I do that?"
Yeah.
He'll be listening to something and go, "Andrew, it's one of yours." I've got no recollection of making that.
And that's before you get to, jockey slut charts and NME charts.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Each of which you can go back to now, and it's like, fuck me, that tune still stands up. And the Black Notebooks, it was amazing of Nina to share those YouTube playlists,
sure.
because it just... They're dark songs that he's collected there, and it's a whole particular side to his personality and musical personality, that it's this blend of, it's a thin line between love and hate next to... I'm trying to think what kind of... there's a lot of very gothic indie stuff, a lot of heavy country and western.
Well, the Triffids as well, I noticed on one of
Triffids,
the
exactly.
lists.
Some quite sort of cold wavy early 80s stuff, but somehow the aesthetic through all of that. And again, that's another little musical encyclopedia in its own right.
Yeah.
He was always very good at describing music as well. I remember very early days of DJ Mag, DJ charts, where you had to write, some... top banger or whatever. I can't remember what the track was now, but he said, "Moody builder, I don't mean a hod carrier overcharge."
I remember that. Oh, God.
I think it was M People, actually. It was Colour My Life.
So the next tune from the album, which should have been called Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and it does say that on the sleeve, and they weren't allowed by Disney to use it, is...
It's A.R. Kane, Left from Outer Space.
Got to play that next one. Yeah.
We'll have the other one as well.
We'll have the other one, yeah. Sean, who chose the name of Love From Outer Space?
Oh, Andrew came up with that.
Did he? Right, okay.
We bandied a few things about. I can't even remember now what we bandied about, but he rang me one day and said, I've got it, it's going to be A Love From Outer Space. And he said, also, I was down Charing Cross Road, I was in the second-hand bookshop and I found a book and it's got this amazing illustration. And he turned up with a picture of the blindfold man from the logo. And,
what were your first nights out with him like under that moniker?
Okay, it was interesting. So we started Love From Outer Space in the basement of a pub in Stoke Newington. Right. Very, very small room, maybe 80, you could get 100 people in there. Wow. And we thought, we'll do it on a Thursday night, we'll do it once a month and we'll give it a go, and probably our mates will come down and nobody will be interested in it, but we like this music and we want to do it. So we did it, and the first few were, I think the first one was reasonably well attended, and then it was pretty ridiculous from there on in.
What I've really enjoyed watching in what's happened with A Love From Outer Space is you take it to these really quite disparate places. So I know they're not here tonight, but you know, the Golden Line up in Tombadon, you know, with Wacker and Gig, you know, and it's become a regular haunt for what you do.
Park the family over there, man.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, the Golden Lion is definitely the coolest pub in the country. That's just a very, very special place and very special people, and it was always really magical to do it there. It's pretty bonkers. I can't remember my exact words how I described it, but it was a two-part school disco to some sort of cult happening. But yeah, two-part school disco to two parts Wicker Man.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, and that's what I really loved about Andrew. You know, you could see him. I mean, again, I go back to my first experience of dealing with him in a kind of business sense, that he would come and play on a Thursday night in a basement and not really know anything about it, whilst at the weekend he was getting paid a lot of money to play in really big venues, and I really liked that about him so much.
I was talking to Giles Peterson last night. He said, you know, when he was first on the international circuit, there were 4 main DJs that he would bump into in weird places. Well, 3 others, 4 including him, and it was Harvey, Carl Cox and Weatherall. They were the ones who would like just go off the beaten track for the adventure, basically. They're the explorers.
Yeah, an explorer is the pertinent word for Andrew, isn't it?
The Love From Outer Space thing, I mean, you know, I said before about those kind of in the last couple of weeks and sharing all the memories and everything, the golden threads that it's kind of we all found running through our lives, where you join when you first heard a tune to like suddenly hearing it again. I mean, obviously the A.R. Kane one was a massive one, because that was one of those kind of weird psychedelic indie tunes that didn't fit anywhere. And at the time, hearing Weatherall was something that gave us indie kids with exploratory taste permission to go, this is actually part of the same thing as the bleepy music and this, that and the other. But also, like, when I first heard you guys play, it was like so many of those strands coming together, because it was those kind of, you know, like Screamadelica, the track, that kind of plod, sub 120 BPM plod that we always loved and wanted to hear more of in clubs. There's shoegaze in there, there's obviously, like you say, the sort of deeper history of the Italian stuff. And it's like, it's not revivalist. No. Nothing about it was ever revivalist, but it was like keeping this several rich traditions alive.
Completely. Very sort of ritual trance at those nights as well. Just you suddenly find yourself like, where did those 8 hours go? You're just kind of locked in and lost in it. I think it really reinvigorated that entire tempo of it. You know, that's a down to Alphos, I think.
I think kind of reinvigorated Andrew a little bit as well, because when we started doing it, I don't think it'd be unfair to say that he kind of got himself into a rut or he painted himself into a corner, but he was trawling himself around the European mega clubs playing dreadful Humpty Bumpty music. Brilliant. I think he just found it refreshing to be able to actually just play whatever he wanted, and I kind of enjoyed pushing him into uncomfortable places with it as well by playing ridiculous pop records that I know that he never ever had the. Like Kylie Minogue or M pop music. I remember the first time I played this Todd Terrio remix of M pop music, it was at the Drop, and he raised an eyebrow rather harshly. I thought, oh my God, I think I might have done it now. But he kind of gave me a strange look, and then everybody went absolutely bonkers, and then he started playing it himself, so it was like...
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I've discussed with a few friends over the last couple of weeks is I recognise definitely that there was either, I'm not sure that reinvigoration was a word that was in my head, but definitely this new phase of a part in his journey of his career, his work that he did. He just seemed to be becoming more and more successful, and part of it, I think that what I've been recognising is that willingness to go off the beaten track, but it just seemed genuinely authentic. Genuinely authentic.
And that's one of the many tragedies of his passing is that I thought he was on a roll, like as a DJ and a producer, and his best stuff was coming, I listened back to that Qualia album, and it's amazing. It's as good as anything else he ever did, and his sets were just as mind-blowing as the first time I heard him, and I think it's, I know there's a lot of music still to...
he was working on so much stuff. The week that he passed away, Nina Walsh, his studio partner, called me and said, on Friday we finished an album of tracks that we'd made just purely to play A Love From Outer Space, and there's 12 tracks and they're all absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And there's stacks and stacks of it. They've been working so hard for the last year, not done any more remixes, and really focused on, producing their own stuff, and it really, like Justin said, it's some of the most amazing work that he's ever done.
So much of it came out of his willingness to work closely with someone else. Obviously, I think as I wrote last week, you can hear his ears, that he could hear the skills of someone, whether it's Hugo Nicholson, whether it's Nina, whether it's
Sean.
Exactly.
Or Steve or Tim.
Exactly, and the same goes on the decks as in the studio. That it sparked something new in him, because it's been said 1,000 times before, but it really bears repeating that at various points in his career he could have become up there with Laurent Garnier and Richie Hawtin and Carl Cox. He could have those mansions, he could be doing the panel beater circuit on the highest level. But he each time the willingness to listen to someone who actually wanted to go, hey, let's do that in that basement, kind of dragged him out of that temptation, and instead of listening to those 10,000 people in the crowd, he listened to one person and went off down a different alleyway. But
well, he said to me on certainly 2 or 3 occasions, and the last time I had a very long conversation with him was that he just serially drove his career off the edge of a cliff. And he was just like, but fuck it, that's what you have to do to remain relevant.
But the other thing that he could have been doing as well, and I have no doubt that it would have come at one time or another, was to become one of the truly great commentators of our time as well. I spent all these fucking years learning my craft, having been inspired to write about music by him as a teenager, and still I'm bow before the way that he would pull 3 words out of a hat, and it would just be like, that's actually what that is. And he could have become, had he turned his, had he had the yen, I suddenly was like, do you know what? He could have been Clive James. He could have just wandered around the country commentating on stuff, and it would have been dynamite. He would have been world class. BBC 4 could have put him on and just pointed the camera and go. I'm sure that at some point Lee Braxton, would have Faber or his own imprint now, would have dragged, if not that memoir, then at least something fairly solid out of him. he would eventually have come out with the most incredible writing, and it's all it's there in scraps and notebooks and whatever.
He was always like full of like most arcane knowledge. I remember doing a gig in the Highlands of Scotland in this little remote hotel. We were going down the kind of road, the corridor to our rooms, and he told me about the magical significance of each number on the door. Oh, this one is, like, all right. He's full of like these just little bits of knowledge.
But not just the esoteric weirdo, it's like there's the person that you talk to in the after party who'll tell you all about Aleister Crowley or whatever. But he was learned on all levels. He didn't differentiate between left field and mainstream. Like in when Keith Twitch from Optimo's appreciation of him, he mentioned like an early meeting with him, and they were driving across Italy, I think.
That's right.
Andrew was setting him to write on Keynesian economics, and Keith had studied economics at university, and suddenly found that this was someone who was better read on it than he was.
Stuff like the Cathars stuff with the Carcassonne and all that kind of.
Before we get a bit too carried away with the high culture stuff, we should mention the fact that he was equally as much a lover of low culture.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Absolute rampant stupidity.
Well, the one thing that I've noticed in the last couple of weeks is the number of people, myself included, who have said I could quite happily sit down with him and talk to him about biscuits.
Biscuits. Let's talk about biscuits, because biscuits was a very, very important topic, and we've been conducting biscuit research for probably about 30 years now. And we still haven't reached a definitive answer as to what the best biscuit was, but he certainly liked Choco Leibniz. In fact, he introduced me to the Choco Leibniz in the mid-90s. He liked a hobnob. He liked a chocolate hobnob. He liked particularly a dark chocolate Tonix wafer.
He also liked, his favourite confectionery was a dark chocolate Bounty.
Oh, yeah. He was confectionery. I would get phone calls going, Shawnee, I've just been in the newsagents. They've got a fucking matcha green tea Kit Kat. Can you imagine anything so ridiculous? But it was like...
Brilliant.
I think
he loved that sort of thing.
All the sadness in the last few weeks, every conversation I've had has always ended with some light heart, because he was hilariously funny and always joking and coming out with it. And so every conversation I've had after the kind of tears and sadness, there's always been like a funny story. There's
But it wove back in. It wove back in because it would come into those track titles. It would come into, like, you'd suddenly see some, like, throwaway comment from months previously. I mean, I don't know if this was the original source of it, but I like to kid myself that I helped inspire the title of the most recent single. Because the last time I saw Andrew in a non-work capacity, I was dropping off a friend's record to him, and we just sat down in a greasy spoon, and we're just shooting the shit. And I was like, again. It was like, how have you got time for this? Surely you've got, like, classics to be writing. But, it was just having a bacon sandwich and a cup of tea, and One Love by Bob Marley came on the Heart FM or whatever it was, and the lady behind the counter was singing along, and I sort of remarked to him, it's funny that this is like, local radio will play this when basically it's a religious apocalypse song. It's a song that says God is going to come and smite the unbelievers. And we had a bit of a chat about apocalyptic reggae, and he said, I think I'm going to start the End Time sound system. And so whether this was a riff he already had going, I don't know, but End Time sound became a song, and it's like, those jokes kind of, he would hang on and use it, and they become part of something else he's thinking about.
Let's have another tune, eh?
Well, I'm sorry, this one not quite so light-hearted. This is a remix that Andrew and Nina did relatively recently of Moby, Perfect Life, and it's really moving, but it kind of encapsulates his work really nicely, because you'll hear in this a lot of the stuff, similar kind of sonic palette to the Primal Scream stuff, and it seemed to me to kind of square the circle quite nicely, and I apologise in advance if you find it emotional, because I started doing.
And the ability to make such beautiful things, you know, besides the, you know, the kind of pounding stuff. I mean, you know, I was completely unaware of that until probably only about 10 days ago, and where it took me back to was listening to Wonder again, which I hadn't listened to for quite a while, and specifically Fallen, which is just such an expansive piece of music. It's so beautiful.
Someone with such, you know, ability to go to dark places, whether it's like mentally or you know, experimentally, musically, whatever. I think it's like super important to the understanding of the music that Andrew never looked down on celebration at all. It was, you know, he didn't look down on his crowds, you know, much as he may have tired of Binky Bonky. Umpty Bumpty. You know, it's shot through the music, and the pleasure principle, not as something to get away from life, not as something to get away from the darkness. Sometimes it's like coexistent with the darkness, but you know, it's there from beginning to end. Talking of Nina, we should also mention one of the many, like, you know, new renaissances was the whole Moindu project that they were doing, and some of the best nights I've had in recent years have been, you know, the tiny little things in a little studio or in the basement of the social with poets and folk musicians and unexpected rockabilly, and you know, just it was all there, and that was just like almost not throwaway, but it was just like, let's do something small, let's do something with 125 7-inches and knitted covers, whatever.
Well, it was just that, you know, that continual progression. I think that, you know, the next track we're going to hear is the thing that got released, and that, you know, as I understand, there was an uncertainty of should we release this now, because it was literally released 4 days. Yeah. 4 days after he passed on.
Shall we play it?
Let's play it.
Here's The Unknown Plunderer by Andrew Weatherall.
Wow, and good to know that there's still more to come.
There's so much more to come.
Yeah, brilliant. So, the next track, and I think we should get straight into it, but my day job is I'm a psychotherapist, and I have a practice in Leeds, and in the therapy centre where I practice, there's an iPod with a little dock that the people who owns the centre is loaded with music. This next track has, and I don't know how, I don't know whether it's synchronicity, but literally every time I have opened the door at the end of a session, this track has been playing, to the point of where it started to spook me out a little bit this week, because it's this really beautiful piece of music, but that's the beauty of it. Andrew is kind of there in the waiting room, waiting for me when I come out. So it felt really pertinent to, because this is Leeds-centric really now. Andrew had a really strong connection to the city, and Andrew's connection was really forged by this guy who sits. In fact, you should be sitting there with the guests, mate. Don't sit there. By this guy who brought Andrew up to play at Basic. I think it was for the very first time he played in Leeds and maintained a really strong relationship. Dave Beer from Back to Basic.
Oh, wow. That track was ridiculous then because Andrew, when Alistair, my partner, died, who started Basics with me, Andrew made a special version of that song, Smoke Bells, for Ali Cook. And wow, and he said if Ali, at the time when he died, when Alistair died, he said, Andrew said of Ali, he said, if Ali Cook hadn't have died, he would have changed the course of British house music, if not the world. Yes, and maybe he would, but Andrew actually did that. He went on to do that. This is like 28 years ago, 27 years ago. And he also said to me one day, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up far too much room. And I thought, well, can't we just have enough for a deck chair or something? Just now and then a bit of easy street. He's like, you wouldn't like it. I went, no. And I remember just thinking the other day, I just thought, oh my God, fuck. It's like, well, oh no. It's like, it's not about taking up too much room, it's like he's left a massive fucking gap in the world. Right. And not only that, it's just like, it's not just for his close friends, it's like the most touching thing I've found since he passed is like all the people that didn't know him, who are all rocked by this, all in shock, like anybody who's ever heard a tune by him or a remix by him or shaved his beard. I mean, which is another thing. Like he grew his beard back because there was a shop in Shoreditch was having to close, a grooming shop, because everybody in Shoreditch copied him. So they opened these grooming shops so you could get wax and all that. And he decided to shave it up and they were demoed, you know what I mean? So Andrew grew it back so they could feed the kids, but... I've just made a couple of notes. I don't want to rub it on because it's like...
We're not going to let you, mate. Don't worry.
Well, you will. I'll do what I want, you know that.
Yeah, I know you will get that.
But I was shaking like a shitting dog here. It's like... oh, wow. Just to say, it's like... oh, yeah, I mean, like, if you like my jacket, by the way, I did it took me half an hour on the way here, and I was going to get a tattoo, right, when he passed the point in his honour, right, and I did this. But people called Dave Beer, I got him on, and I noticed just as I was leaving, it said, sail we may, fail we must. And I thought, I'm glad I didn't get the tattoo, but then I'm just... But I am actually going to go and get a tattoo that says that. Yeah. In Andrew's honour, because I know that he fits himself.
He's thoroughly approved.
Yeah, totally. He'd be in stitches, you know what I mean? Because, like, as I say, he's not. We've never like Bobo. We've never and Andrew. We've never liked to follow people. We've tried to be 2 steps further, or just a fun stuff. I couldn't have copied him anyway. So, but the irony of that is perfect because he succeeded and I didn't.
Oh man, thank you, guys. I just want to say a last word. Sean, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well done, Sean.
Joe, thank you. Justin, thanks so much. Dave never plays by the rules. He's got one more thing to say.
Well, it's a positive message. All it is that, like, when I heard about the news, I just thought it's game over. That's it. I don't want to hear another DJ. I don't want to hear another remix. I don't want to hear anybody else ever play. I want to burn my vinyl. It's over. You know what I mean? It's like he was what made what we do cool. Yeah. Right? It justified being a DJ. And if it didn't matter who you met, from rock and roll to dance to disco, if whatever argument was, you could always go, but what about Weatherall? What about Weatherall? And they didn't have another leg to stand on, you know what I mean? It was cool. But I've since thought about it, and I know there's no music to come, and anybody who's ever been touched by that man, just carry on that banner, take the baton and run with it, like folk.
Amen.